If you love colorful patchwork quilts that are nice and big and beautiful to display, well, so do we. And this is why we designed right here at Shabby Fabrics this project called Patchwork of Praise. I love that we took a panel by Block Party Studio. You may have seen their panels. They make a lot of Christian theme panels. This happens to be Comfort of Psalms 6, I believe. And we were able to fussy cut our center. Some of our blocks are log cabin style, which is fairly straightforward, right? Pretty straightforward. That's about precise cutting, 1/4" seam allowance, and pressing. But this other block, kind of a star in the star, which is a little more complex, is what we'll be talking about today. I know what that's like to see a block and go, ooh, that looks complicated. I wish someone would show me how to do that. Well, you're in luck. That's my job today. I'd love to get a little bit of your time, grab a drink, a snack. Let's dive into this so that we can just unpack that one step at a time. You don't have to be a genius IQ to quilt, not even. All you need are some good habits, and hopefully if you can go like, you know what, I'm here to learn. I want to learn these habits so that I can make precise blocks just like this and have a quilt that looks just like Shabby. Totally doable. We have a limited amount of kits. This is called Meadow Walk, by the way. This is an Andover collection. I believe the designer's name is Alexandra Bordolo. If I said that wrong, designer, please give me grace. I think your fabric's beautiful. Hopefully that'll be sufficient for grace. But I just fell in love with her fabrics. And I thought they'd be beautiful in a combination of blocks with the log cabin, the star and the star block. And I love, of course, the wonderful uplifting message in each part of the center of the block. So kits are the way to go. Of course, you'll have the kit. We'll include your pattern. You'll have a backing option. But let's start unpacking this block. It's all, of course, patchwork, as I said, so we all know what that means. Add plenty of sizing to your fabric, get everything pressed out perfectly, get a fresh blade in your rotary cutter, and make your cuts very carefully according to the pattern. And let's go ahead and first start off with the panel. This is something I wanted to emphasize to you, because when you get your kit, this is what the panel looks like, and I've already cut it apart making the video prep. But one of the things that we mentioned inside the pattern is to fussy cut your squares to 4.5 inches. So let's just have a look at our pattern here. We're just going to kind of start top and work down. Here's what I want you to know. If you just look at these markings and you cut there, you might be very much off of 4.5. Pick me, I know. Why? Because I, without even thinking, just pressed this all out, added sizing, so I kind of drew everything all up, put my ruler right along here, and I cut, and all of a sudden, not everything was coming up square. So where I'm going here is, if you got one tool to buy today, there's two, but this is the one that's very important, is 4.5. Is that when you find after everything is pressed out, you don't want to worry about cutting between these lines. What's most important is this thing is 4.5 inches. So let's look at this. Let's give a press, and we'll try to work in an area here so you can see what I'm talking about. We'll work in that lower right corner. So I want to put this right in the corner. Notice how that line is slightly above my ruler. I think that just happens in the imperfection of printing on cloth. I don't know what that process is, but you can see that even though my ruler is right into these kind of corners, these 90-degree corners, you can see that mark is about 1/8 of an inch above this side. It just is. So we know we're going to be sewing with 1/4" seam allowances, so don't worry. In fact, well, let's just cut this out. Let's look at what this looks like. I'm at the line here, so I make sure I don't infringe into the next saying, because we're going to use all of them on the panel here. I'm going to make my cut, trying to be as level as I can. I'm going to make my cut. Try not to go too far past and potentially cutting into the next section, okay? Now if I can kind of rotate this around, make sure I didn't move anything, cut, and now I can cut straight off, right? I'm not worried anymore about that. But let's look at this. Notice how that little corner's in there? Don't worry about that. That doesn't mean anything because we're going to be sewing with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and any markings you see will be hidden. So that's the first thing I want to give you comfort and say, don't worry, trust the process. Everything will work out just fine. I don't think I've ever seen a panel of any kind ever printed perfectly. It's just part of the process and part of the things that quilters do to kind of just, quote, make it work. That's kind of how it happens. All right, once we have that, let's go ahead and set that aside. Let's pretend that we already color all of our fabrics, right? And we already have our fussy cut panel put to the side. Our first step right now is going to be making the flying geese units. Let me show you where we're going to be going here. This is where we're headed. In fact, I'll just press out that block so you can see it all in its glory. Made this last night. It's a lot of fun. So we've already fussy cut our center. Let's talk about the flying geese units. If there was any other, these are the two right here on this table. If there was only two things that I could get in addition to this kit, those are the two. Why? Watch this process. It is incredible. The first thing that we do, and our instructions will guide us into this, is they have us cut a larger piece of this unit here. Only one is needed in 4 of the smaller squares. Such a cool process. 1 of the larger pink and 4 of what here is kind of like a plum color. We place these as we're showing here. I'm going to just be this exactly so you can see it, just like this. On the back of this, each of the 4 smaller squares, I like to use my seam guide where I just simply lay this corner to corner. And I like to, with my friction pen, draw on either side of all 4 of those. Then we place them corner to corner. We cut the gap in between. Easy peasy, right? Where they overlap, we just snip. Then we sew directly on those lines. And I've done that ahead of time. We've done this many times in different videos, and I think this is now becoming very known as a fast flying geese technique. Because back in the day, probably when you learned to quilt, when I learned to quilt, this didn't exist. You basically, to make a traditional flying geese unit, had a rectangle and 2 squares. One in one corner, sew on the line and flip. On the other one, draw a line diagonal and sew and flip. And there was a lot of waste, and sometimes my flying geese units were great, and sometimes they were not. But this takes the guesswork out of it, and this is where the magic of the Ultimate Flying Geese tool is phenomenal. I just happen to be making this size of a unit here, and this I believe is a 2x4 inch flying geese unit. But as we can see on our tool, this tool that I'm going to be using with you has the capability of making flying geese as small as a 1/2 inch tall by 1 inch wide for the most crazy miniature quilts of all time, all the way up to 4 inches tall and 8 inches wide, and all of these sizes in between in that tool. This is why I do not make flying geese any other way. For flying geese that are made with incredible efficiency, almost minimal waste of fabric, and are perfect every time. So we're going to go through that process of cutting that apart, and I'll also talk to you about what you would have to do if you don't want to make making flying geese units with the Ultimate Flying Geese tool, and you want to square those up yourself. It can be done. It's a little bit more mathematical, not always reliable, but I'm going to show you that because I want you to see. I'm not trying to just sell you another notion. I'm trying to sell you a phenomenal notion that when I was making these last night, I'm like, which drawer is that tool in? Because I don't want to make these any other way. I want them to be perfect. Of course, right? That's why these points came out. I'm not that great. the tool is that great. So, all right, press these away. And that's our first step. And our pattern's going to be showing us that so that you can follow along. This is what we have right here. That's what we're showing you right there. Okay, but remember that I said to you that there's 4 of these smaller squares. So now what? We place these right in the valley here, just like that. And notice those lines are jetting up right through that. Phenomenal. Let's sit that right in the corner. And we're going to pin and pin. Okay. And let's just go sew one. I want you to see that. And we go down the other little valley there, line. Okay, so you probably know what I'm going to do next. I am going to cut in between those valleys, press to the outside, press to the outside. So far we have 2 oversized flying geese units. Oversized is phenomenal. That means we get to square up. Now, with your other unit, you do the same. Place in the corner, sew up the valley, cut, and now you would have 4 flying geese units. That's how you start off with 1 pink, 4 of those plums, to end up with 4 flying geese units. How cool is that? I love it. But let's talk about now this squaring up, because our instructions are giving us information that we need to square this up to 2.5 by 4.5. Let's do this first without the tool, and let's do it with the tool. So I have a variety of tools with me. So I've got a 2.5 by 12.5. So now I'm kind of like, okay, how would I do that, right? We know it's got to be 4.5. So you'd go, okay, 4.5 divided by 2 would be 2.25. So now we're measuring 2.25 over from the point to the right and 2.25 to the left. See what I mean? It starts to go, ooh, I'm already uncomfortable with that. Is there a better ruler that will help me out? Well, let's see here. I know this tool is a 4.5 by 8.5, and I have this lovely grid. This kind of X marks the spot. I think I might start with this one, which is going to help me first establish that. And if I know it is 2.5, then I would turn this around and measure 2.5 here. And then we mentioned that half of 2, or 4.5, would be 2.25. So at this point, I would be from that exact point going, okay, I'm going to measure over 2.25, trying to line up the top of the block. Let's see how we can do this. We're smart people. We can do this. I don't think I'm having fun right now, but I think I can get the job done. So that's 2.25, right up through that pink point, and this is running across the top. And now if I know the whole block is 4.5, what I could do is measure here 4.5. Down here, it's like, no, something's off with that here. That's 4.5. Yep. And I can make a cut. I got there, didn't have a good time. Okay. And I'm really good at math, right? That's my background. But not a lot of people like that or are good at math or enjoy that. Ain't got no time for that, as I say. Let's talk about using the Ultimate Flying Geese tool, which is actually fun and takes all of the math out of this. Our pattern even mentions if you are using the Ultimate Flying Geese tool, use the marks for a finished size of 2 by 4, lines labeled D. Ding. Think about what I just said. I want to unpack that for a minute. Use the marks for a finished unit of 2x4. Let's talk about that. We just squared this up to 2.5 by 4.5 because that's an unfinished measurement. Creative Grid tools, lock this into your memory for now and forever. They put on their tools finished measurements sewn into a quilt. This is 2.5 by 4.5 now, but when I sew this into this quilt, that finishes to 2x4 because we're losing a 1/4 inch all the way around. So you have to make that connection. So knowing that, we say, okay, let's go look at our tool. Let's unpack that. What do they mean by letter D? Remember how I have the finished sizes, right? On the left, D is 2x4 finished. There was our cut that we started with. We had 1 of those squares. We had 4 of those squares. But over here, trim 1, I have A, B, C, D. Guess what? There's D. But on the other side of the tool, and we're going to use this together, is trim 2. So cool. And again, A, B, C, D. Watch this. Coolest trick ever. I never get tired of promoting this tool because it is probably the tool from Creative Grid I feel the strongest about because of the value of what's in this tool. That many sizes from a miniature quilt of 1/2 by, 1 to 4 by 8 and everything in between, that's crazy. And one tool is crazy. I think it's brilliant. All right, trim 1. There's the letter D. Check this out. All right. I'm not really lining up anywhere on my spinning mat, but I love using this with a spinning mat. You can use it without, but watch why it's cool with a spinning mat. I will not lift up this block throughout the trimming sequence. There's the letter D, and I'm going to fit it right into that beautiful delta right like that. So cool. How it just sits right in that spot. Now, let's look at what that's done for us so far. Are going right along our fabric. The right side and the top is exposed, but notice the bottom and the left is not. That's why there's 2 trim functions. The first trim function, trim 1, I'm going to trim the right side, rotate my mat, and trim the other side. So let's just do it. Let's just live it. Cut, cut. How many times have I lifted my block so far? 0. Trim it, turn it one more time. Now, trim 2 is up at the top. We're going to drop this down into the pocket, and I'm just going to move the block only so it's in the center so my head's out of the way. It's the only reason I'm moving the block right now, is so you can clearly see what I'm doing. A, B, C, and D. Once again, I have that nice V that I'm dropping right into the slot there of that fabric. But because we've already trimmed the left side and the bottom, look how I have 2 more alignment lines that help me know I'm in the right spot. We have our V, we have alignment on the left running right along that cleanly cut side in here, and now the other 2 sides are open for cutting and available for cutting. So now we cut, rotate our mat, and cut. Have I made a believer out of you? The first time I had someone demonstrate that, I was like, give me that tool. Because my flying geese units, as I said, were inconsistent at best, and there was so much waste. I hated creating a rectangle, having a square, drawing a line, sew on the line, and I trimmed and all that away. It was in the trash. I'm like, no. I didn't like how I felt about it, and it was inconsistent, and they were not consistently good. So I love this for, again, minimal waste of fabric, but precision, 4 at a time that are just perfect. And it's fun to use the trim up tool, and I don't have to use my math brain to get there, right? Which sometimes, especially quilting late into the night, I'm like, oh, not so sharp. All right, we create our 4 units, and then it's time to basically get them in position, right? We have this here. You have your other ones here. I just have the 2 so far because the other 2 are over there. Now we're laying everything out. The main thing I wanted to show you was how do we make these flying geese units and what are your options. So let's go look at this. Once you have all of your flying geese units made, you can see here that we're simply right side together, of course, sewing our 1/4 inch seam allowance. The arrows are how we're going to press. This is letting us know that we're pressing away from our flying geese unit here in the middle. We're pressing toward our flying geese unit, right? Just like we've done here, and the bottom again. And that's giving us our interlocking seams right there. That gives us our interlocking seams, and then we're pressing away from the center. And that's really how we're making the center part of the star. That's the first star. All right, now let's move on to the next part of our pattern. Oh, by the way, that's just the one style. I want to point that out here. So some of our stars are going to be in this coloring, and some of our stars will be in this other coloring. Just be mindful of that. It's letting you know how many to make of each unit. So this is kind of a pattern. You just need to keep track of that. You're making 3 like this and 3 with that fabric combination. All right, moving on, we have a little bit of strip piecing, and that is for this portion. Very straightforward with that. Of course, I press to the dark fabric, and then this is having us cut 24 units, 2.5 inches, so no big surprise there. And we simply sewed a rectangle to the left of that. So just want to point out here that for some of those, we're adding the rectangle to the left side, and for some of them, we're adding the rectangle to the right side. So don't just line them all up and put them all on the left and think it will work. It won't, right? Because it has to be on the opposite. So you're going to make 12 with the D on the left and 12 with the D on the right. Really no mystery with that. And I've made ours ahead of time, so we'll be able to assemble our block a little bit later on. So you can just see how I did that. No big surprise. But of course, I do have for my block, half are on one side and half are on the other, right? Makes sense. Okay, let's put that aside. That's not a big mystery. I definitely want to spend a little bit more time, though, talking about the other portions of what make the other star. So far, we've done our center unit, and we've done this unit. This is where I want to spend time because we're going to talk about half-square triangles. A lot of pressing is going to be very specific for us to get some interlocking seams. So this is where we're going to spend more of our time. For the large star point units, I would say this part, be especially careful about this. You might even want to label your fabrics. The D is a constant. That's our background. That's happening kind of over and over again. But you'll notice that this fabric here, we have these two, and then on this block, these two, and now these fabrics are changing. There's a lot going on. It's not a difficult process, but it's more of just keeping track of what am I working on right now. So our first step will be on the back of our D, which is our cream colored fabric, to either draw the line, or in my case, I always love my seam guide, right? You can draw the line. That's how I learned it in the beginning. And later on, you'd sew a 1/4 inch on either side. Well, Creative Grid, being who they are, they said, well, some people have a difficulty tracking a 1/4 of an inch left and right. That was me. So maybe they designed this for people like you and I that maybe have challenges with that. So you always have that option, by the way. You don't need to have a seam guide. I, again, don't make these without using it. For me, it's my go-to. I like putting that and drawing, corner to corner, drawing on either side, because I want to sew on a line, not try to track a 1/4 inch away from a line. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so in my instance, I chose to use my seam guide instead of drawing that. But this is where I want you to keep track here. Keep in mind that the letter A is just trying to represent to you that this process here, notice I just have this fabric because that's what the block we're working on right now. This is not always going to be this fabric. This is a process, but we're going to have AD units, CD units, FD units, that's the one I have right now, and GD units. So I just wanted to point that out. it's just this process. This D fabric is going to happen over and over again, but this A fabric is going to change out depending on what you're working on in here. So just to point that out. All right, right side together, pin, and we're simply going to sew directly on the line here. So I've already done that ahead of time, and I wrote myself some notes as I was doing my video prep to make sure to mention important things to you that I noticed as I was making the project. So we're going to cut apart, and in this instance, I want to call your attention to this right now, because not only is this fabric changing out so that you can get AD units, CD units, and these, but the pressing directions. Notice here, in this unit, you're pressing toward D. In this, you're pressing toward D. In this, you're pressing toward the pink. Here you're pressing toward that beautiful patchwork fabric. Why, you will see. It's always to get interlocking seams. It's not to make your life more difficult. It isn't. It's so that all your points come together so beautifully because the interlocking seams happen. So in this instance, because I happen to have this fabric here, put that aside for the moment. Here, let me just cut that apart. This will make more sense if I just do that in action with you here. This is letting me know in this instance I'm going to press toward the pink. We're so used to sometimes as quilters of pressing toward the dark every time. This is one of those times here and here that we didn't do that. And that doesn't feel natural, but there's a very specific reason that we're doing that. You will see that. And once again here, we're going to press toward our pink. Okay. So you would get all of your units into the half square triangle format. For this particular unit here that we've done, this was the next unit. This is the one that we'll be working with right here, the CD, where once again we would layer our fabrics just like they're shown, sew on the lines, but I want to show you how this one is going to be, we're going to press it differently. This is this unit right here, this combination. So once again, we layered them together, sewed on our lines, cutting apart. And just like we've always thought, you might be tempted to press toward the dark, but notice our pattern is saying, no, 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 not this time. We want you to press toward the cream. You will see why here in just a little bit. Okay, so that's going to be an important step for us. Okay. Once we have all of the half square triangles made, pressed in the proper direction, our next step, and this is really universal, is if you have your seam, or they're on the back side now, we're going to be on the back of our half square triangles. If our seam is running this way, we're going to draw in the opposite direction, either corner to corner. I'll give you an example of what that would be if you are a person that likes to track 1/4 inch away. That's not me, but if that's you, that's what you're going to do. The line is moving in a direction opposite of your seam. For me, because I like to use my seam guide, same thing. Corner to corner, just like that. I'm drawing. And go ahead and do all of those because all of them will be marked. Okay. Once we have those marked, I want to follow along in the pattern, exactly where the pattern is, so that you're not having to go, okay, she said this in the video, but where is that in the pattern? This is where we are in the pattern right now. So let's look at that. Notice how we have our dark fabric here, our light fabric here, and our seam's going this direction, and we've drawn our track on the opposite. We've got our little dog ears. If they bug you, you can trim them off. They're not hurting anything, but if that sight picture bothers you because it's a little bit different, then here we are. This is what we're doing. Now, this is very important. In this instance, because of the block that we're making, which is this one right here, my fabric isn't going to necessarily be the C this time. It's going to be this fabric because this is the block we're making. This example here of that letter C is not the one I'm working on at the moment, okay? That's going to be up here. This is going to be this block up in the upper right. So just, again, don't take that necessarily literally. It's a process we're trying to show you. We had to choose one color or the other, so that's how that is. I want to point this out. Our pattern is having us cut these fabrics that make up kind of that bracket, that V to support these half square triangles. It's having us cut these to 5.5 inches. This unit is slightly larger than 5.5. Because we're later on going to be squaring this whole thing up again, don't worry that this half square triangle unit is a little bit bigger. I'll show you what I'm talking about. When I put these right side together, do you see how this half square triangle is just a little bit bigger? Doesn't matter. This whole thing is going to be squared up again till perfection. Just get them in the ballpark of being pretty much in the same footprint. You'll see. You'll trust the process, as they say. Let's just pin that. Let's go sew that together. And you'll see what I'm saying here. Let me move that pin. All right. Because I have this here, I'm going to start sewing from this versus here, right, where my presser foot could roll that back. So let's just start sewing down our drawn lines. Okay, you probably know what I'm going to do right now, right? Is cut on that sewn line. All right, now we need to once again refer to our pattern. I think I know what this is going to tell me. Let's look here. This is saying, let's look at our sight picture. Let's see what we have here. So this sight picture that I'm looking at right now is this one. This is saying, another example. Where does this seam want to go? There. But what is our pattern telling us? If this is what your unit looks like, you have to press in this direction. I was not actually expecting that. So let's warm up that seam because it's not going to want to do this. All right, and it is to press this direction. A great chance, if I have a clapper, I don't think I do, that's a great, anytime a seam does not naturally want to move in a direction, but a pattern is saying you need to, grab a clapper. That's that weighted wood that you get to press, lay on top of a nice hot seam, and let it just sit there while you're working on your next section of your quilt block, and it'll help it lay flat. But let's just keep rolling here, even though we don't have a clapper. That's okay. I'm going to get that heated up full hot. All right, I'm just going to trim off those little dog ears because they always bug me. All right, so again, not hard, but paying attention versus assuming, right? Now, here's what I want to point out to you. With each of these kind of, I think they're called like 3/4 blocks, sections here, you get a different footprint. Notice how this is this one. Here, these are switched, and once again, we press away. So let's do that again, where we're pressing toward this unit, even though it doesn't want to. Why all this pressing fussiness? You will see. It will pay off. I promise. It is not just to make your life less fun in the sewing room. It is not. It is to make your blocks more accurate. So we know that we have this unit, and we know that we have this unit. Very important to note that when you are making this unit, one of those is going to be in one set of blocks and one will be in another. They are not going into the same block. Here's what I'm talking about. See how this works here? Because in this block, the plum is on the left, the bubblegum pink's on the right, but look at here. They're flipped. That's because of how the output of this. So that also, I nearly sewed the wrong, because they're squares, it fit. I was like, ooh, that one is for one block and one is for another. So this is a block, this is a pattern that is just about paying attention. And that's why labeling can help you out a lot. Okay, now that we have definitely beat that drum pretty hard, you're going to trim up this unit to 4.5. Remember how we fussy cut our panel with a 4.5 inch square up tool by Creative Grid? Obviously a phenomenal tool to have, but this is where it's going to be used again. So I would say between the Ultimate Flying Geese tool and these are really two half-2 rulers, I would say. Now, what are we looking for when we're squaring this up? Is it any 4.5? It is not. It's very important that I've got my 4.5, and while I have it right here, and this would work anywhere on the line, let's think about that for a minute. Our goal, once this is trimmed up, I want you to see it from my vantage point, is what's the problem with me trimming it up here? Look at how lopsided this is. We still, while I'm placing this line along the seam, it's not the only thing I'm looking for. I want this corner to be running right up that seam. So I'm not only running this way, but right there. See how now I am along the seam, but that point is in the corner. Don't move. This is when you start cutting. Okay? So I'm cutting, rotating, rotating, and rotating. Look how perfect that is. I love that. My Flying Geese units didn't have to be perfect. These units didn't have to be perfect. I had to put the ruler in the perfect spot, but I didn't have to do perfect sewing. And now look at this unit. It's incredible. It's incredible. Okay, so let's see. Let's look at that. Now, I have another one. Let's see if I got the right one trimmed. Let's look at that. I think I did. Okay, let me give this one a press. Same process with the other combinations. Now let's look at this one. Let's look at what this combination was, which looks like it's this one right here. So looking at what we have, let me get all this out of the way. So we're just concentrating on the part I really want to draw your attention to. We have this one with our seam pressed that direction, and this unit right here is this one. Notice how it's toward the pink. Let's look at this, because we're now on the next page. Let's look at this. Because of the way we pressed, why was all this pressing shenanigans? Here's where you've made a deposit, and now this is where you get a return. When I place them right side together, look how this seam is that direction and this seam is here. And down in this corner, this seam is moving in this direction and that seam is down. Watch this. When I stack this right on top of each other, it just clicks in like a puzzle. We're going to pin right there. We're pinning here. I absolutely have my 1/4 inch seam guide in. And we're going to sew 1/4 inch. Our iron's heating up, and you will see that all of that precise squaring up, pressing, and now this stage of pinning and sewing 1/4 inch will be an incredible, beautiful point that'll look just like that. That's not luck. It's a process, and you can do it. So my seam guide is in place to hold me true. Let's go. Okay, we're going to live this together here. Okay. All right, let's warm up that seam. I can see it's going to want to evenly distribute that and press that open, of course. Look at this. Look at how perfect it is. I'm not that good. It's just the tools. It's the process. You can learn this, and this is what I love. Things like singing, guys, you don't want to be sitting next to me in church. I love singing praises to Jesus. People just don't want to hear it, though, because I'm always off key. But I sing with my whole heart. I'm never going to be an Adele. There are certain things in life that are God-given talents, and there's others that can be learned. The wonderful news about being a quilter and being a really accurate quilter, totally learnable. And I love that. You don't have to have God-given talent. Let's turn that over and let's admire how beautiful and accurate that block is. Look at that. Isn't that incredible, right? The points are on the money. And so much of my early quilting days, what I did not know, two things. I didn't know anything about anything other than a 6 back in the day, 6 by 24 inch ruler. I had one ruler total, and I had no clue about pressing. And now I know how important both of those things are. And of course, the 1/4 inch seam allowance. Can't ever forget that. So you can see you're making a variety of different combinations depending on the block you're working on. Let me get this part out of the way here. So once you have all of your elements, we know we have our center block. Let's just look at this. The main thing I wanted to show you today, we all know how to sew blocks together, was tips and techniques on Flying Geese units. How do we make something like this precise, and why does pressing matter? What is this oversizing and squaring up, and why are we doing these extra steps? You can see the results are undeniable. So now let's just lay out our block. Let's just see what we've done. Okay, we know that part is here. We know we have this part over here. This is always so much fun to lay out a block. And look how big these blocks are. They're beautiful. So let's see, what are we doing here? Is that right? Here. Okay. So that looks right to me, right? Is we have purple, purple. Do a check. Remember how I said this unit looks almost identical, except that's in that arrangement, and then they flip. So if you make everything all at the same time, you could easily get that wrong. So I've done way too much seam ripping, can you tell? A little PTSD. I check a block again a couple times and go, yes, sanity check is good. This is what this block should look like. Once you have confirmed that, now it's simple, right? This is where we're right side together, good pinning, 1/4 inch seam allowance, top row, middle row, bottom row, and this is letting you know what direction to be pressing in. It looks like pretty much everything's pressed open to kind of flatten that block. And you have a big, beautiful block. The trickiest part of this whole thing is making sure you've got which fabric is going with which combination, right? But as you can see, this was the block to unpack. This was the one that's like, oh, there's a lot going on. But if you follow the process, really pay attention, maybe label your fabrics, and of course those amazing tools. Ultimate Flying Geese and the 4.5 are the MVPs of this quilt block. So I hope you enjoyed today's video unpacking what looks like a complex block, and you can see it's really just breaking it down one step at a time. So be sure to head to the website, pick up the kits. Very limited in quantities. We cannot order more. Be sure to pick up the backing. You will be getting your pattern in the kit, so don't worry about that. But don't forget that Ultimate Flying Geese tool. The 4.5 inch square up, you saw how it looks. It works beautifully with a spinning mat. And if you're like me and need a seam guide or any other notions, be sure to pick those up as well. Subscribe. This is the place for inspiration, education. So much more is coming your way. Thank you again. I'll see you soon on another Shabby video.